The dust on Theresa Anderson's white lace dress had barely settled when she heard the church doors slam open behind her, and every person in that packed Newton, Kansas sanctuary turned to see who would dare interrupt a wedding in the summer of 1882. Theresa stood frozen at the altar, her hand clasped in the clammy grip of Raymond Whitmore, the banker's son she was about to marry. Her father had arranged this union 6 months ago when their ranch fell on hard times. Raymond was 35, soft around the middle, with thin hair he combed carefully over his balding crown. He had money, land, and respectability. What he did not have was Theresa's heart. She was 22 years old and had spent her entire life on the Kansas prairie. Her mother had died when she was 15, leaving her to help her father run their struggling cattle ranch. The drought of the past 2 years had nearly destroyed them. When Raymond Whitmore had offered for her hand, her father had accepted before she could protest. It was not cruelty that motivated him, but desperation. The money from this marriage would save their home, their legacy, everything her mother had loved. But now someone had burst through those doors. Theresa turned slowly, her veil shifting across her face. Through the delicate lace she saw him. Preston Shaw stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, his dark hair disheveled from riding. He wore his working clothes, dusty chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and boots that had seen 1,000 miles of hard country. He was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling, and his gray eyes found hers across the crowded church with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Do not do this," Preston said, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. Raymond's hand tightened on hers. "Get out," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "This is a private ceremony." "It is a mistake," Preston said, walking forward down the aisle. His spurs jingled with each step. "Theresa, please do not marry him." Theresa's father, Thomas Anderson, stood from the front pew. He was a weathered man of 52, his face lined from years under the sun. "Shaw, you have no right to be here. Leave now before I have you thrown out." "I have every right," Preston said, stopping at the front of the church. He looked only at Theresa. "I know I should have spoken sooner. I know I am a coward for waiting until now, but I cannot let you do this without telling you the truth." "The truth?" Raymond sneered. "The truth is you are a drifter with nothing to your name. You work other men's cattle and sleep in bunkhouses. What could you possibly offer her?" Preston's jaw tightened, but he did not look away from Theresa. "I have nothing to offer but love. Is that enough for you?" The church erupted in whispers. Theresa felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Her hand slipped from Raymond's grasp without her meaning to let go. Preston Shaw had come to work at her father's ranch 2 years ago, hired on as a ranch hand during their busy season. He was 27 then, quiet and hardworking, skilled with horses and cattle alike. He had stayed on through the winter, then through the next year. He never spoke much about his past, but Theresa had learned pieces of it through long evenings when they had worked side by side. He had been born in Texas, orphaned young, raised by an uncle who had more interest in whiskey than in children. Preston had left at 16 and made his way north, working ranches from the Red River to the Montana territories. He had a reputation as an honest hand, someone who kept his word and did his work without complaint. Theresa had fallen in love with him slowly, the way water wears stone. It started with the way he gentled the horses, his hands patient and sure. Then it was the sound of his rare laughter, deep and genuine. It was the morning he had found her crying in the barn after a particularly hard night, when the weight of her responsibilities had crushed down on her, and he had simply sat beside her without speaking until she was ready to face the day again. They had never spoken of love. She had thought he saw her only as the boss's daughter, someone beyond his reach. And when her father had announced her engagement to Raymond, Preston had said nothing. He had simply touched his hat brim to her and walked away. Now he stood before her, dust on his boots and hope dying in his eyes as she remained silent. "Theresa," Raymond said, his voice tight, "tell him to leave." She looked at Raymond. He was not a cruel man, but he was not kind either. He saw her as an acquisition, a pretty wife to display at social gatherings, someone to manage his household and bear his children. In the 6 months of their engagement, he had kissed her twice, both times feeling like obligation rather than affection. Then she looked at Preston. His hands were shaking slightly as he held his hat. She had never seen him afraid before. "Why now?" she asked quietly. "Why did you wait until now?" "Because I am a fool," Preston said. "Because I told myself you deserved better than a man with nothing. Because I thought love was not enough when you needed security and comfort. But I was wrong, Theresa. If you marry him, you will have everything except the one thing that matters. You will have money and a fine house and respectability, but you will not have joy. You will not wake up beside someone who thinks you are the most remarkable person who ever drew breath. You will not have someone who loves you so much that the thought of living without you is worse than any poverty." "This is absurd," Raymond said. He grabbed for Theresa's hand again, but she stepped back. "Is it true?" she asked Preston. "Do you love me more than I have words to say?" "Since when?" "Since the day you climbed into the corral with that wild mare everyone else was afraid to touch. You were so gentle with her, so patient. You did not break her spirit, you earned her trust. I watched you and I thought, that is the kind of person I want to spend my life knowing." Theresa remembered that day. It was one of her first memories of Preston, actually. The mare had been considered dangerous, but Theresa had seen fear in her eyes rather than meanness. It had taken 3 weeks, but eventually the mare had let Theresa saddle her. "You never said anything," Theresa whispered. "I should have. I am saying it now." Thomas Anderson stepped forward. "This is not a matter of feelings, Shaw. This is about survival. Raymond's money is the only thing keeping us from losing the ranch. If Theresa breaks this engagement, we lose everything." "I know, sir," Preston said, "and I cannot match his offer. I have saved $200 over the past 2 years. That is all I own in the world besides my horse and my saddle. It is not enough to save the ranch. It is not enough to give Theresa a comfortable life. But I will work every day of my life to make her happy. I will love her when times are good and when times are hard. I will respect her and listen to her and stand beside her through whatever comes." "Pretty words," Raymond said coldly. "They will not pay debts or put food on the table." "No," Preston agreed, "but I will. I will work harder than any man you have ever met. I will take any job, do any honest labor. I will not let her starve or suffer. It will not be easy, but it will be real." Theresa felt tears sliding down her cheeks beneath the veil. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone in the church must hear it. "Papa," she said softly, turning to her father, "I am sorry." "Theresa, no," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "Think about what you are doing." "I am thinking about spending the next 50 years married to a man I do not love," Theresa said. "I am thinking about becoming like Mrs. Henley and Mrs. Watkins, those society women who smile at parties but whose eyes are dead inside. I am thinking about lying beside Raymond every night and wishing I was somewhere else. Is that what you want for me? Is that what Mama would have wanted?" Thomas Anderson's face crumpled. "Your mother would have wanted you to be safe. She would have wanted me to be loved," Theresa said. "You loved her, really loved her. I remember the way you looked at each other. Do not make me settle for less than what you had." Raymond's face had gone red. "You would throw away everything for this nobody. Your father will lose his ranch because of your selfishness." "It is not selfishness to choose love," Theresa said, her voice growing stronger. "And Preston is not a nobody. He is the best man I have ever known." She reached up and pulled the veil from her face. Then she began to unpin the elaborate hairstyle Raymond's mother had insisted upon. The pins clattered to the floor one by one. "Theresa, stop," Raymond said. "You are embarrassing yourself." "I am setting myself free," she said. She turned to Preston. "I do not care if we have to live in a tent. I do not care if I have to wear the same dress for a year. I want to wake up beside you. I want to hear your laugh. I want to build a life that is ours, not something bought and paid for." Preston's face transformed. The fear melted away, replaced by pure joy. He stepped forward and took her hands. "Are you certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything." Raymond made a sound of disgust. "Then you are both fools. Your father's ranch will be foreclosed within the month. You will be homeless, penniless. Do not come crawling back to me when you realize what you have thrown away." He turned and stalked out of the church, his mother following with an indignant huff. Theresa barely noticed. She was looking into Preston's eyes, seeing her whole future reflected there. "I am so sorry," Thomas Anderson said quietly, "for trying to force this, for not considering your happiness. Your mother would have been ashamed of me." "No, Papa," Theresa said, tears streaming freely now. "You were trying to save our home, I understand. But now we will lose it," Thomas said heavily. "Because I was too proud to accept the truth. The drought destroyed us. Perhaps it is time to let go." Preston cleared his throat. "Sir, if I may, I know my savings are not enough to cover all your debts, but what if we sold off some of the land, kept just the homestead and the pastures nearest the house, used that money to pay the most pressing debts? Then we all work together to rebuild, smaller but more manageable." Thomas looked at him sharply. "We, if you will have me, sir, as your son-in-law and your partner. I know I am asking a lot. I know you had hopes of better for Theresa. But I give you my word I will work until my hands bleed to make this right." The minister, who had been standing silently at the altar this entire time, finally spoke up. "I must say, in 30 years of performing ceremonies, I have never seen anything quite like this." "I am sorry, Reverend Taylor," Theresa said. "I should have spoken up sooner." "Better now than later," Reverend Taylor said with a small smile. "Though I confess I would not mind seeing things resolved properly. You two clearly wish to marry, perhaps not today, not like this, but soon." Preston looked at Theresa. "I would marry you right now if you would have me. In my almost wedding dress in front of all these people who came to see me marry someone else," Theresa said. Then she laughed, a bright, genuine sound that filled the church. "Yes, absolutely yes." So Reverend Taylor married them there in the Newton church, with Theresa still in her white lace dress and Preston in his dusty work clothes. Her father stood beside her, tears running down his weathered face. The townspeople who had come for a society wedding stayed for something far more interesting, a union built on love rather than convenience. When Preston kissed her, it was nothing like Raymond's obligatory pecks. It was tender and passionate and full of promise. Theresa felt like she was coming home after a long journey. They spent their wedding night in the small room Preston rented above the general store. It was not fancy, just a narrow bed and a washstand and a window that looked out over the main street. But when Preston carried her over the threshold, Theresa felt like a queen. "I will build you a proper home," Preston promised. "It might take time, but I will make sure you have a place you are proud of." "I am already proud," Theresa said, touching his face. "Proud to be your wife." They made love slowly, learning each other, speaking in whispers and touches. Preston was gentle and patient, making sure Theresa felt cherished. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, listening to the sounds of the town settling into sleep. "Tell me I did not dream today," Theresa said softly. If you did, then I am dreaming too, Preston said. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. I still cannot believe you chose me. How could I choose anyone else? Theresa said. You are the only one who sees me. Not as a piece of property or a means to an end, but as myself. I see a woman who is strong and capable and kinder than anyone I have ever met, Preston said. I see someone who loves deeply and works hard and never gives up. I see the person I want to build a life with. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and when Theresa woke in the morning to find Preston watching her with such love in his eyes, she knew she had made the right choice. The next weeks were not easy. Raymond's bank, which held the mortgage on the Anderson ranch, immediately called in the loan. Thomas Anderson had 30 days to pay the full balance or lose everything. Preston and Theresa moved into the ranch house to help. Together, they took inventory of everything they owned. The cattle herd was down to barely 100 head after the drought losses. The pastures were recovering slowly from lack of rain. The house itself was in good repair, but needed paint and minor fixes. We could sell the back 40 acres, Thomas suggested one evening as they pored over maps and account books. Old Samuel Henderson has been wanting to expand his spread. He might pay a fair price. That leaves us with just 200 acres, Theresa said. Is that enough? It is enough if we are smart about it, Preston said. He had been studying the land, riding the property line every morning. The creek runs through our remaining property. We have good water, which is more valuable than space right now. If we improve the pastures, rotate the cattle properly, we can run enough head to make a living. It will be a smaller life than you are used to, Thomas warned Theresa. Good, Theresa said firmly. The old life nearly killed us trying to maintain it. A smaller life sounds perfect. They sold the back 40 to Henderson for a fair price. They also sold a dozen horses they could not afford to feed, keeping only the best breeding stock and the work animals they needed. Preston's $200 went into the pot, along with every cent Thomas had managed to save. When they walked into the bank to settle the debt, Raymond was there. He looked at them with cold satisfaction. Come to beg for an extension. We have come to settle our account, Thomas said evenly. He counted out the money on Raymond's desk. Raymond's expression shifted from satisfaction to surprise to anger as he recounted the bills. This is the full amount. Every penny, Preston said. We will take the deed now, please. You sold the Henderson parcel, Raymond said flatly. It was ours to sell, Thomas replied. You have made yourself insignificant, Raymond said. 200 acres, you will barely scrape by. We will scrape by free and clear, Preston said. No debts, no obligations. I like the sound of that. Raymond's jaw tightened. Theresa, you could have had everything. Fine dresses, a mansion in town, servants. I have everything, Theresa said, linking her arm through Preston's. I have love and freedom and honest work. That is more than you can buy. They walked out with the deed in hand, the ranch fully theirs with no encumbrances. It felt like the first day of spring after a hard winter. The work of rebuilding began immediately. Preston proved to be everything he had promised and more. He worked from before dawn until after dark, repairing fences, improving water sources, caring for the cattle. He taught Theresa things he had learned on other ranches, better ways to manage the herd and preserve the grazing land. Thomas, relieved of the crushing weight of debt, seemed to grow younger. He worked alongside them, his spirits lifting as the ranch slowly transformed from a burden to a joy. Theresa learned to stretch every dollar. She made their clothes, grew a large garden, preserved food for winter. The life was hard, but it was honest. Her hands grew calloused and her skin tanned dark from the sun. She had never been happier. In the evenings, after the work was done, She and Preston would sit on the porch and watch the sunset. Preston would play the harmonica he kept in his pocket, simple melodies that spoke of loneliness and hope and home. Sometimes they talked about their dreams for the ranch. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, just being together. "You ever regret it?" Preston asked one evening about 3 months after their wedding. "Giving up the comfortable life you could have had?" Theresa looked at him in genuine surprise. "Never, do you?" "I regret that I cannot give you more," Preston said. "Fine things, an easy life." "Preston Shaw," Theresa said firmly. "Look at me. Do I look unhappy?" He studied her in the fading light. She was wearing a simple cotton dress she had sewn herself, her hair in a practical braid. She was strong and healthy and glowing with contentment. "No," he admitted. "You look beautiful." "I am happy," Theresa said. "Truly happy. Every day I wake up beside you is a gift. Every meal we share, every moment of work we do together, every night we fall asleep exhausted and satisfied, it is all exactly what I want. Do not doubt that." Preston pulled her close and kissed her soundly. "I love you more every day. I did not think that was possible, but it is true." "I love you too," Theresa said. "More than words can say." That winter was hard, but they faced it together. The cattle made it through with careful management and the use of stored hay. Preston had been right about the creek. Its reliable water was their greatest asset. In early spring, they sold 20 head at a good price and used the money to buy more breeding stock. Theresa discovered she was pregnant in April. She had suspected for a few weeks but waited to be certain before telling Preston. When she finally shared the news, his face went through so many emotions she could barely track them all: fear and joy and wonder and excitement. "A baby," he said, his hand trembling as he placed it on her still flat belly. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Theresa asked. "I am terrified," Preston admitted, "and happier than I have ever been. Both at once." Thomas Anderson cried when they told him he was going to be a grandfather. "Your mother would have been so thrilled," he said, hugging Theresa carefully. "She always wanted a house full of grandchildren." "Just one for now," Theresa said with a laugh. "Let us see how we manage with that before we plan for more." The pregnancy was not easy. Theresa was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep food down. Preston worried constantly, but she assured him this was normal. Her mother had told her once that Anderson women had difficult first months but easier later months. She was right. By her second trimester, Theresa felt wonderful. She continued to work, though Preston tried to get her to rest more. She was not an invalid, she told him firmly. Women had been having babies since the beginning of time, and most of them, while doing far harder work than managing a small ranch. Still, Preston was protective. He took on the heavier tasks, would not let her lift anything he deemed too heavy, and worried if she was on her feet too long. It was endearing and occasionally annoying, but Theresa knew it came from love. In late November, during the first cold snap of winter, Theresa went into labor. The midwife, Mrs. Patterson from town, arrived in time to help. Preston paced the front room, nearly wearing a path in the floorboards. Thomas tried to distract him with whiskey and conversation, but nothing helped. When Theresa cried out, Preston started for the bedroom door. Thomas held him back. "Let Mrs. Patterson do her work. Your wife is strong. She will be fine." "What if something goes wrong?" Preston asked, his face pale. "What if I lose her?" "You will not," Thomas said firmly. "Anderson women are tough. My wife delivered Theresa during a thunderstorm with no midwife present. Theresa will manage just fine." After 8 hours of labor, Theresa delivered a healthy baby boy. When Mrs. Patterson brought the squalling infant to Preston, wrapped in a soft blanket Theresa had knit, Preston stared at his son with awe. "He is perfect," Preston whispered. "He is loud," Mrs. Patterson said with a smile. Strong lungs on this one. That is a good sign. Can I see Theresa? Preston asked. She is asking for you. Preston carried his son into the bedroom. Theresa was propped up on pillows, exhausted but radiant. Her hair was sweat-dampened, her face flushed, and Preston thought she had never looked more beautiful. "Meet your son," Preston said softly, placing the baby in her arms. Theresa looked down at the tiny face, the dark hair, the little hands waving in the air. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting to meet you." The baby settled at the sound of her voice, his eyes trying to focus on her face. "What should we name him?" Preston asked. "I was thinking about my mother's father," Theresa said. "His name was James, James Alexander." "James Alexander Shaw," Preston said, testing the sound. "I like it." "Jamie for short." "Perfect," Theresa said. Thomas met his grandson with tears streaming down his face. "He looks just like Theresa did as a baby," he said, touching the tiny hand with one weathered finger. "Welcome to the world, Jamie. You have been born into a family that will love you fiercely." The first months of parenthood were exhausting. Jamie was a healthy baby but demanded frequent feeding and did not sleep for long stretches. Theresa and Preston took turns walking him when he fussed, learning what different cries meant, marveling at every tiny change and development. Preston was a devoted father. He would sit with Jamie for hours, talking to him softly about the ranch and the horses and all the things they would do together when he was older. He changed diapers without complaint and got up for nighttime feedings, bringing Jamie to Theresa and then sitting with them both, watching his wife nurse their son with such love in his eyes it made Theresa's heart ache. "You are a natural at this," Theresa told him one night after he had successfully soothed a fussy Jamie back to sleep. "I am figuring it out as I go," Preston said. "Same as everything else in life." "You are a wonderful father," Theresa said. "I knew you would be." "I had no example to follow," Preston said quietly. "My uncle barely acknowledged my existence. I was afraid I would not know how to do this." "You do it with love," Theresa said simply. "That is all that matters." As Jamie grew, the ranch prospered. The good water and careful management paid off. Their herd increased steadily. Preston's reputation as an honest rancher spread, and they were able to sell their cattle at fair prices. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and debt-free. When Jamie was 2 years old, Theresa became pregnant again. This time she was less anxious, knowing what to expect. The pregnancy went more smoothly, and in the spring, she delivered a daughter they named Catherine Rose, after Preston's mother whom he barely remembered. Katie, as they called her, was a quieter baby than Jamie had been, content to watch the world with serious blue eyes. She adored her big brother, who was gentle and protective with her. The house that had once seemed too large for just Thomas and Theresa now felt perfectly sized for their growing family. They added on a room for the children to share, with plans to expand further as needed. Preston proved to be as good with children as he was with horses, patient and kind but firm when necessary. He taught Jamie to ride before he was 4, started him on gentle chores around the ranch. He sang to Katie, told both children stories, played with them even after long days of hard work. "You have given me everything I did not know I wanted," Preston told Theresa one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching Jamie and Katie play in the yard while Thomas supervised. "A home, a family, a purpose. We gave it to each other," Theresa said. "That is what partnership means." "Do you remember what I said in the church?" Preston asked. "That I had nothing to offer but love." "Of course," Theresa said. "It was the bravest thing anyone has ever said to me." "I was wrong, though," Preston said. "Love was not nothing. It was everything. It was the foundation for all of this." He gestured at the ranch, the children, their life together. Everything good came from that choice you made. That we made, Theresa corrected. You chose to speak up. You chose to be vulnerable. That took courage. I was terrified, Preston admitted. I thought you would reject me in front of everyone. I thought I would lose you forever. You could never lose me, Theresa said. She took his hand, rough and calloused from work, and pressed it to her heart. I am yours completely. I have been since the day you sat beside me in the barn and did not ask me to explain my tears. You were so brave that day, Preston said. Trying to hold everything together for your father, for the ranch. I wanted to tell you then that you did not have to be strong alone. But I did not think I had the right. You always had the right, Theresa said. You were already mine, even if neither of us knew it yet. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their land, listening to their children's laughter, feeling the peace that came from knowing they were exactly where they were meant to be. When Jamie was 6 and Katie was 4, Thomas Anderson passed away peacefully in his sleep. He had been slowing down for months, his heart growing weak, but he had lived to see his grandchildren thriving, his daughter happy, his ranch secure. Preston found him in the morning, looking peaceful, a slight smile on his weathered face. They buried him next to Theresa's mother in the small cemetery outside Newton. Jamie and Katie stood solemnly beside their parents, not fully understanding death but sensing the sadness. Many townspeople came to pay respects. Thomas had been well liked, a fair man who always kept his word. He was proud of you, Preston told Theresa that evening. He told me so many times. He said you had a strength your mother would have recognized. I wish they both could have seen the children grow up, Theresa said, tears sliding down her cheeks. They saw enough to know Jamie and Katie are loved and happy, Preston said, holding her close. That is all any grandparent really wants. The ranch was entirely theirs now, and with it came more responsibility but also more freedom. They made changes they had been discussing for years, improving buildings, experimenting with different grazing patterns. Preston proved to have a gift for breeding cattle, developing a reputation for quality stock. Ranchers came from as far as Dodge City to buy his bulls. Theresa expanded the garden, started raising chickens for eggs and meat, began selling butter and cheese in town. She taught Katie to sew and cook, taught Jamie to read and do figures. Preston taught them both to ride and rope, to respect animals and land, to keep their word and work hard. The years passed in the rhythm of ranch life, seasons turning, cattle being born and raised and sold, children growing taller and more capable. Jamie developed his father's quiet competence, his patient way with animals. Katie showed her mother's determination and kindness, always the first to notice when someone needed help. When Jamie was 10 and Katie was 8, Theresa became pregnant again, much to everyone's surprise. She was 34 now, had assumed her childbearing years were behind her. But the baby growing inside her was strong and healthy, making its presence known with vigorous kicks. Another blessing, Preston said, his hand on her belly feeling their child move. Though I confess, I had gotten used to sleeping through the night. We will manage, Theresa said. We always do. This pregnancy was harder than the previous ones. Theresa tired more easily, needed more rest. Preston took on more of her usual tasks without complaint. Jamie and Katie stepped up too, doing chores without being asked, helping their mother when she needed it. In late summer, Theresa delivered twin girls. The midwife, now Mrs. Patterson's daughter Sarah, who had taken over her mother's practice, looked surprised when the second baby came. Twins, she said, wrapping the first baby while the second squalled. Did not expect that. Preston looked overwhelmed, holding both daughters at once while Sarah tended to Theresa. 2, he said faintly. We have 2 more babies. Are they healthy? Theresa asked, exhausted. Perfect, Sarah confirmed. Small but healthy and strong. You did well, Mrs. Shaw. They named the twins Margaret Ellen and Elizabeth Jane, after no one in particular, but simply because Theresa had always liked those names. Maggie and Beth, they called them, though telling them apart was difficult at first. Maggie had a tiny birthmark on her left shoulder, and they learned quickly that she was the louder of the two, while Beth was quieter and more observant. Jamie and Katie were fascinated by the babies. 10-year-old Jamie was gentle and helpful, while 8-year-old Katie appointed herself assistant mother, always wanting to hold them and help feed them. 4 children, Preston said one exhausted night after finally getting both twins to sleep. I used to think I would never have a family at all. Now I have 4 children and the most wonderful wife in the world. You have your hands full, that is what you have, Theresa said with a tired laugh. But I would not change a thing. The twins' first year was chaotic. Just when Theresa thought she had a routine figured out, one of the babies would change their schedule and throw everything into disarray. Preston hired a local girl, Mary Foster, to come help a few days a week so Theresa could rest. But even in the chaos, there was joy. The first time both babies smiled at once, the first time they laughed, the first steps they took holding onto furniture, all of it was precious. Jamie and Katie were patient older siblings, entertaining the twins when Preston and Theresa needed to work. The ranch continued to thrive. With careful management and a few good years of rain, they had built up a solid operation. They were able to hire 2 ranch hands to help with the heavy work, allowing Preston more time with his growing family. When the twins were 3, Preston suggested they take a trip to visit his uncle's grave in Texas. He had never made peace with his childhood, and he thought it was time. They traveled in a wagon, the journey taking 2 weeks. Jamie, now 13, was fascinated by everything they passed. Katie, 11, kept a diary of their adventure. The twins found everything exciting, every town and landmark worthy of amazement. Preston's uncle was buried in a small cemetery outside San Antonio. The grave was unmarked except for a simple wooden cross with his name. Preston stood looking at it for a long time, Theresa beside him, the children waiting quietly in the wagon. I used to hate him, Preston said finally. For not loving me, for not caring. But standing here now, I just feel pity. He had a chance to have a family, to love a child who needed him, and he wasted it. His loss, Theresa said simply. I am grateful, though, Preston continued, because his failure taught me what not to do. When I look at our children, I know exactly how a parent should love. I see what he missed, and I make sure I never miss a moment. He turned away from the grave and walked back to the wagon, taking Beth from Katie's arms and swinging Maggie up onto his shoulders. Jamie and Katie climbed up beside Theresa, and they continued their journey, leaving the past where it belonged. They spent a week in San Antonio, showing the children the Alamo, eating new foods, experiencing city life. Then they headed home to Kansas, all of them eager to see their ranch again. The years continued to pass. Jamie grew into a young man, tall and lean and serious like his father. At 16, he was already handling many of the ranch's daily operations. Katie at 14 was beautiful and bright, excelling at her schoolwork and helping her mother manage the household. The twins at 5 were energetic and curious, into everything and full of questions. Preston, now 42, had gray threading through his dark hair. Theresa at 39 had lines around her eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but Preston thought she was more beautiful than ever. She was his partner in every sense, working beside him, raising their children with wisdom and love, making their house a home. One evening in late spring, they sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The children were inside, Jamie helping the twins with their letters while Katie cleaned up after dinner. "You ever think about that day?" Theresa asked. "The wedding that did not happen." "Sometimes," Preston admitted. "I think about how close I came to losing you. How if I had not found the courage to walk through those doors, you would have married Raymond Whitmore and I would have spent the rest of my life alone." "I think about it too," Theresa said. "I think about standing at that altar, feeling like I was dying inside. And then I heard the doors open and I turned around and saw you, and it was like I could breathe again." "I was so afraid," Preston said. "My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my hat. I thought everyone would laugh at me, this nobody cowboy thinking he had something to offer the boss's daughter." "You had everything to offer," Theresa said. "You had the only thing that mattered." "Love," Preston said softly. "Love," Theresa agreed. "You asked me if it was enough, if love was enough. Do you remember what happened next? You took off your veil," Preston said, smiling at the memory. "Started pulling pins out of your hair. Raymond looked like he wanted to die of embarrassment." "I was setting myself free," Theresa said. "Throwing away the cage I had been about to walk into, and when I looked at you, I knew. Love was not just enough, it was everything." "And now?" Preston asked. 17 years later, 4 children, a lifetime of hard work and joy and struggle. Is it still enough?" Theresa looked at him, this man who had burst into a church with nothing but his heart in his hands. He had kept every promise he made. He had worked until his hands bled, just as he said he would. He had loved her through good times and bad. He had built a life with her that was real and honest and beautiful. "Look around," Theresa said, gesturing at the ranch, the house with lamplight glowing in the windows, the sound of their children's voices inside. "Look at what we built from nothing but love. Does it look like love was not enough?" Preston pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "It was more than enough. It was everything." They sat together as the stars came out, comfortable in their silence, secure in their love. Inside, their children were safe and happy, growing into good people who knew they were loved. The ranch that had once been threatened with foreclosure was now prosperous and secure. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility, all because a cowboy had found the courage to stop a wedding and offer his heart. All because a woman had been brave enough to choose love over security. All because they had believed that love was enough and had spent 17 years proving it true. Time continued its steady march. Jamie turned 18 and told his parents he wanted to stay on the ranch, to make it his life's work as they had. Preston and Theresa could not have been prouder. They made him a full partner, trusting his judgment and valuing his input. Katie at 16 had 3 young men from town courting her, bringing flowers and stammering through conversations while she smiled politely. She was in no hurry to marry, she told her mother. She wanted to see something of the world first, maybe become a teacher. The twins at 8 were finally developing distinct personalities beyond Maggie's loudness and Beth's quietness. Maggie was fearless, climbing trees and riding horses too fast. Beth was thoughtful and artistic, always drawing pictures of the ranch and the animals. Preston and Theresa settled into the comfortable rhythm of long marriage. They could communicate with a look, anticipate each other's needs, work together seamlessly. They still sat on the porch most evenings, still made love with passion tempered by deep knowledge of each other, still laughed at private jokes and shared dreams for the future. When Katie turned 18, she announced she had been accepted to the teaching college in Topeka. It was bittersweet, watching their daughter prepare to leave, but they were proud of her ambition and courage. "She gets that from you," Preston told Theresa the night before Katie was to leave. "That determination to make her own way. She gets it from both of us," Theresa said. "You showed her what it means to be brave, to pursue what matters even when it is difficult." They sent Katie off with tears and pride, knowing she would do well. She promised to write every week and come home for holidays. Life on the ranch continued. Jamie proved to be an excellent rancher, with ideas for improvements that Preston had not considered. Father and son worked together easily, mutual respect and affection making them an effective team. The twins grew into young ladies, different as night and day but devoted to each other. Maggie wanted to be a rancher like her father and brother. Beth wanted to be an artist. Preston and Theresa encouraged both dreams, believing their daughters could be anything they wanted. Katie came home from college engaged to a young lawyer she had met in Topeka, a kind man named David Fletcher who loved her laugh and her intelligence. Preston interrogated him thoroughly before giving his blessing, but anyone could see David adored Katie. They married in the Newton Church, the same church where Preston had stopped Theresa's wedding nearly 20 years before. As Preston walked Katie down the aisle, he caught Theresa's eye and they shared a smile, remembering that dramatic day. Jamie, at 21, began courting Sarah Patterson's daughter Anna, a sweet girl who was not afraid of hard work. They married a year later, and Preston and Theresa added on to the house to give the young couple their own space while remaining part of the family operation. The twins at 13 were becoming young women, still inseparable despite their differences. They attended school in Newton, riding the 5 miles each way together, always returning with stories of their day. Preston at 48 still worked hard but had learned to delegate more. His hair was more gray than dark now, his face weathered by decades under the sun. But his gray eyes were as sharp as ever, and when he looked at Theresa, they still held the same devotion they had on their wedding day. Theresa at 45 had grandchildren now, as Katie had given birth to a son and Jamie and Anna had a daughter. She loved watching Preston with the grandchildren, seeing him gentle and patient, teaching them as he had taught their parents. "We have built something good," Theresa said one evening, watching Preston show Jamie's daughter Mary how to pet a calf without frightening it. "Something lasting." "We built it together," Preston said, joining her on the porch after the children had gone inside. "Every bit of it." "Do you ever regret the life you gave up?" Theresa asked. It was a question she had asked before over the years, always seeking reassurance. "What life did I give up?" Preston asked, genuinely puzzled. "I had no life before you. I drifted from place to place, working other people's land, sleeping in other people's bunkhouses. I had no roots, no purpose, no reason to wake up in the morning except to earn my next meal." "You gave up freedom," Theresa said. "The ability to drift, to go wherever you wanted." "That was not freedom, that was running," Preston said. "I was running from loneliness, from the pain of never belonging anywhere. You did not take my freedom, Theresa. You gave me a home. You gave me a reason to stay in one place and build something permanent." "That is not a sacrifice, that is a gift." "I love you," Theresa said, tears stinging her eyes. After all these years, he could still move her to tears with his honesty. "I love you," Preston said. "More now than the day I married you, which I would not have thought possible." The twins graduated from school and faced choices. Maggie, true to her childhood dreams, stayed on the ranch. She worked alongside Jamie and their father, learning every aspect of the operation. Beth won a scholarship to an art school in St. Louis, a prestigious opportunity that would take her far from home but give her the training she craved. Letting Beth go was harder than letting Katie go had been. Beth was their baby, the youngest, and sending her to a big city felt dangerous. But Beth was determined, and Theresa remembered being 18 and desperate to make her own choices. "Let her go," Theresa told Preston, who was struggling with the decision. "She needs to try, needs to see if she can make her dreams real." We have to trust we raised her well enough to handle whatever comes." So they sent Beth to St. Louis with their blessing, extracting promises that she would write often and come home if she felt unsafe or unhappy. Beth thrived in the city, her letters full of excitement about her classes and the art she was creating. Katie and David had 3 children in quick succession, 2 boys and a girl. Jamie and Anna added 2 sons to their daughter. The ranch house rang with children's laughter during holidays and summer visits. Preston at 55 was slowing down, his body feeling the decades of hard work. He had arthritis in his hands, a lingering stiffness in his back. But he was content, surrounded by family, secure in the knowledge that the ranch would continue after him. Theresa at 52 had her own aches and pains, but she remained active and engaged. She doted on her grandchildren, teaching them to cook and garden and appreciate the simple pleasures of ranch life. Maggie at 20 married a neighboring rancher's son, a young man named Peter Sullivan who shared her love of the land. They built a house on the far corner of the property, close enough to help with the main ranch but with their own space. "Our family is spreading out," Theresa observed, watching Maggie and Peter move into their new home, "growing in all directions." "That was always the goal," Preston said. "To build something that would outlast us, that would give our children and grandchildren a foundation to build their own lives on." Beth came home after 3 years in St. Louis with a portfolio of stunning paintings and an offer to have her work displayed in a Kansas City gallery. She had also brought home a young man named Robert Chen, whose family had emigrated from China and who shared Beth's passion for art. They married in a small ceremony, blending both families' traditions, and settled in Kansas City where both could pursue their art. Preston and Theresa watched their children build their lives, make their choices, face their own challenges. It was bittersweet, this letting go, but it was also fulfilling. They had raised good people who knew how to love and work and dream. "We did it," Theresa said one evening. They were in their 60s now, both moving slower but still active. "We raised 4 children to adulthood, all of them happy and settled." "You did most of the hard work," Preston said. "I just tried not to mess them up too badly." "You were a wonderful father," Theresa said firmly. "You are a wonderful father. They all adore you." "They adore you too," Preston said. "You taught them kindness and strength. You showed them what it means to be a good person." They had been married 40 years now, nearly as long as Theresa had been alive before she met him. It felt like a lifetime and like no time at all. She could still remember the day he had burst through the church doors, the sound of his voice asking if love was enough. "It was enough," she said aloud, following her own thoughts. "In case you were still wondering." Preston knew immediately what she meant. "I stopped wondering years ago, but it is good to hear anyway." As they entered their 70s, Preston's health began to fail. The arthritis worsened, making it painful to work. He developed heart trouble, his breath coming short after minimal exertion. Theresa stayed close, managing his care, making sure he rested and took the medicines the doctor prescribed. Jamie ran the ranch now, with Maggie and Peter's help. The operation was prosperous and well managed. Preston could rest easy knowing his life's work was in good hands. "I have lived a good life," Preston told Theresa one evening. They were in their bedroom, the window open to let in the prairie breeze. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "Do not talk like you are dying," Theresa said, though she knew he was. The doctor had been clear about his failing heart. "We both know I am," Preston said gently. "And that is all right. I am 73 years old. I have had 42 years with you, 4 children, 10 grandchildren, and a life full of love and meaning. That is more than most people get." "It is not enough," Theresa said, tears sliding down her lined face. "I need more time." "You will be fine," Preston said, taking her hand. His grip was weak now, but his eyes were still clear. "You are the strongest person I have ever known. You will grieve, and then you will keep living. You will spend time with the children and grandchildren. You will watch them grow. You will live, Theresa. That is what I need from you. Keep living." "I do not want to live without you," Theresa whispered. "Yes, you do," Preston said. "Because we built something beautiful and you need to see it continue. Our children need you. Our grandchildren need you. Promise me you will keep going." "I promise," Theresa said, though her heart was breaking. Preston died peacefully 3 days later, Theresa holding his hand, surrounded by all their children. His last words were, "I love you. You made my life worth living." Theresa felt like half of herself had been torn away. For 42 years, Preston had been her partner, her love, her best friend. The house felt empty without him, even filled with family. She grieved deeply, as Preston had known she would. But she also kept her promise. She kept living. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, passing on stories about Preston and the early days of the ranch. She tended her garden, helped where she was needed, and slowly found peace in the memories. Katie came home for an extended stay, bringing her children to keep Theresa company. Jamie and Anna visited daily from their house on the property. Maggie and Peter stopped by every morning and evening to check on her. Beth traveled from Kansas City once a month, bringing new paintings to brighten Theresa's home. "He would want you to be happy," Katie told her mother one evening. "Dad always wanted us to be happy." "I am not unhappy," Theresa said. "I am grateful. Grateful for every moment we had, every memory we made. Your father gave me a beautiful life, and I will honor that by appreciating it rather than drowning in sorrow." As the months passed, Theresa found a new rhythm. She could think about Preston without dissolving into tears. She could smile remembering his jokes, his patience with the children, the way he had looked at her as if she hung the stars. On what would have been their 43rd anniversary, Theresa walked to Preston's grave. It was next to her parents in the Newton Cemetery, a simple marker with his name and dates and the words beloved husband, father, and grandfather. "I miss you," she said aloud, not caring if anyone heard. "Every single day, but I am keeping my promise. I am living. Our children are wonderful, Preston. You would be so proud. Jamie runs the ranch as well as you did. Katie's children are brilliant. Maggie and Peter just told me they are expecting their 3rd child. Beth has paintings in galleries across the state. We built something good, you and me together. Thank you for stopping that wedding. Thank you for being brave enough to offer your heart. Thank you for 42 years of love." She stood there a while longer, feeling the wind on her face, watching the clouds drift across the Kansas sky. Then she walked home to the ranch, where her family was gathering for Sunday dinner, where life continued in all its messy, beautiful glory. Theresa lived another 8 years, dying peacefully at 83, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. Her last thoughts were of Preston, of the day he had asked if love was enough, of the lifetime they had built proving that it was. They buried her next to Preston, and if anyone had been watching, they might have noticed how the wind seemed to sigh with contentment, as if two souls were finally reunited after a brief separation. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations. Jamie's grandson would eventually run it, then his granddaughter after that. But they all knew the story of how it began, of the cowboy who stopped a wedding and offered his heart, of the woman brave enough to choose love over security. In the small museum Newton eventually established, there was a photograph of Preston and Theresa taken on their 25th anniversary. Preston stood tall and straight, his arm around Theresa's waist. Theresa leaned into him, her face turned slightly toward his, both of them smiling. Beneath the photograph, a placard told their story. Preston Shaw stopped Theresa Anderson's wedding in 1882, declaring he had nothing to offer but love. She accepted. They married that same day and spent 42 years building a life on that foundation. Their descendants still run the Shaw Ranch outside Newton, a testament to the power of choosing love over wealth, of building a life on what truly matters. When asked late in life if she regretted her choice, Theresa Shaw simply said, "Love was not just enough. It was everything." And it was true. Love had been enough, more than enough. It had been the foundation for a family, a legacy, a story that would be told for generations. It had turned a lonely drifter and a desperate young woman into partners who built something beautiful. It had proven that the best things in life cannot be bought or sold, only freely given and gratefully received. Preston had burst through those church doors with nothing but his heart in his hands, and Theresa had taken that offering and turned it into a lifetime of joy. They had faced hardships and losses, struggles and setbacks, but they had faced them together, hand in hand, heart to heart. In the end, love was not just enough. It was the only thing that truly mattered. Everything else, the success of the ranch, the raising of their children, the building of their legacy, all of it flowed from that one brave choice, that moment when Preston asked if love was enough and Theresa answered yes. Yes, love was enough. It always had been. It always would be. And their story, played out on the Kansas prairie in the wild days of the West, proved it beyond any doubt.